As a child, one of my favorite Christmas traditions was our family Christmas Eve. Now, living on a homestead on an island with a ferry that stopped running at 6 p.m., Christmas Eve church wasn't all that accessible to us. So instead, we created our own tradition. Family lore has it that it started when one of my younger sisters, who was about 4, and just couldn't wait for Christmas. And so my mom wisely redirected her giddy impatience with a project. They took paper sandwich bags and sand and little candles and created a pathway out through the woods with twinkling luminaries, which later that evening we followed as a family, singing Christmas carols and wondering where the path would lead. It was only that first year that we were genuinely surprised when we arrived at a creative creche set, the favorite baby doll wrapped in a blanket, nestled among cedar branches, surrounded by candles and homemade paper stars. And yet, each year that followed, we would walk with equal anticipation and hope for the peaceful and magical scene that would await us. Now, Christmas Eve growing up was stressful at times. Family tension might color the household experience, but every year, even if it was just for that hour or so, all of that was put aside, and we walked peacefully together through the dark night, following the glow of the candles and singing strains of "O Holy Night," the same words proclaiming this weary world rejoicing that we heard Marissa's soaring voice offer us just moments ago. The weary world rejoices, and yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. This refrain feels particularly appropriate this year, a year when our worlds are weary, when the words "our weary world" speak to the feeling deep in my soul. Our world is weary, we are weary, our patience is running thin, our hope has been battered and stretched, our grief piles up, and the world around us reminds us of how far we still have to go before peace on earth is realized. Friends, it's a rough time. But this is not the first time the world has been weary. Imagine that time, the night when Christ was born. It was a rough time then as well. We look back at the birth of Christ, the Prince of Peace, and we're reminded how he came during a time when people were being required by the empire to travel at great length to their hometowns to be taxed. Mary and Joseph were far away from home that night, away from the comforts of family and friends, and there was no room for them, even in the inn. Jesus was born into a city that was overflowing with issues of economic insecurity and power and oppression and chaos. And into that chaos, he was born an infant, vulnerable and innocent, showing us that the power and transformation of God comes in the most unexpected times and unexpected places. Jesus' birth was announced by an angel that showed up and told a young woman that she would be the one to give birth. Jesus was born in a manger, and the birth announcement to the angels did not go to the chief priests or rabbis at the temple, but instead out in the fields where the shepherds were, the marginalized workers that were scorned yet depended on, who were at the outskirts of town. These were the ones who were told this good news of great joy for all people. And friends, it was good news of great joy. This joy was not just a little bit of mediocre happiness in a hard time, but great joy. The long-awaited salvation and hope were proclaimed. Good news of great joy for all people, peace on earth and goodwill for everyone. This was the proclamation of the birth of Christ. And yet that longed-for peace, it didn't just happen all at once. The world didn't seemingly change on a dime right after Jesus was born. The shepherds went back out to the fields, proclaiming Christ's birth on the way. The wise sages sought out the Christ child, asking the people in power where he was, which triggered a mass slaughter out of jealousy and the fear of the power being taken away from them. The world didn't suddenly just become just and joyful and peaceful. All wars and oppression didn't instantly cease. And yet, something was irresistibly different. Something happened that changed everything. And that echoes out into the universe and throughout history. That remains with us today. A baby was born. Innocence broke through struggle and strife. Hope came, curled up in his mother's arms, and whimpered as she nestled her face on his little head. God came among us. The great and loving God of all creation slipped into human skin to walk with us. God was hungry and thirsty and cried and was comforted. Jesus brought joy to his mother Mary. He giggled and reached out and touched her nose. And this, my friends, is an Advent message that can ring true even this year. God's coming doesn't immediately change all the external circumstances of this weary world. It's not just about finding peace out there or one perfect fix for our life struggle or the challenges of the world. If I just this, if we just that. This story of Advent instead invites us, reminds us, and calls us to be people of hope, people who continue to walk faithfully with God and one another, believing, living in that hope and promise of Emmanuel, God with us. Because yes, there is struggle, there is hunger. We live in a world where we see division and isolation and poverty of body and spirit. We each are living real human lives, and we carry with us loss and longing, along with our desires and hopes. And it's in and amongst all of this that Emmanuel, God of incarnation, is with us and offering us hope. This is not a hope that is devoid from trouble and pain. No, this hope, this peace, is the hope and peace that comes as the Prince of Peace, in and amongst the messiness of life, in and amongst our family systems, in and amongst a world that is experiencing struggle and strife, hunger and poverty, illness and death, showing us again and again that God isn't far away and inaccessible, that God is here with us, and that as this is still true today. God is still reaching out and touching us with love and comfort and even hope and joy, great joy, deep in our hearts, between one another. And so the weary world rejoices. It doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't mean we're not weary, but it means that God is with us and even cares enough to make us smile. The weary world rejoices because among us is one who gives worth to our souls, who points us to hope in a weary world, who is breaking open that glorious morn. Emmanuel, God is with us. Amen.